Hey guys, welcome back to the Fanspo podcast, episode 8. I'm Emmett Robinson, the host for Australia.
I'm Mohit.
TK from Canada.
And today we're going to be going over our Eastern Conference standings predictions, alongside with some general discussion about what everyone places teams, and just discussions briefly about the offseason and the team in general. So without further ado, we'll start. My 15th seed in the East, I've got the Brooklyn Nets.
I've also got the Nets in at 15.
Yeah, same here, Nets 15.
So I think we all place the Nets here purely off the fact that they're going into a full rebuild. Their best player, who was already a tier lower as a best player in the NBA, has got traded. They're relying on Cam Thomas, who is a known bucket getter, to be their number one option. And other than that, the scoring stretch is quite limited. They're a team which is quite young now, and the rumours are that they're going to get rid of Dorian Finney-Smith, Cam Johnson, who are two of the only guys on this team Cam Johnson, who can get a bucket. So they're only going to get worse, which is a good thing, and I'm just glad that the Nets have finally got into a rebuild.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they got their picks back earlier this offseason, which was very important if they were going to blow it up, and that's what enabled them to trade away Mikal Bridges. They have a very bad roster, no need to sugarcoat it, and that's exactly what they wanted. And I think they are very clearly the worst team in the East.
Yeah, for sure. I think this will be like one of the worst teams we've seen in the last 3-4 years. Just a singular season worst team, which is fine. I think in this draft you're getting an opportunity to pick high and draft with Cooper Flag and Ace Bailey at the top. So getting a franchise cornerstone is important, as they don't really have anyone right now as they start the rebuild.
Who do you guys think on this roster is, other than Cam Thomas, is a guy you're going to be excited to watch this season?
I think Nick Claxton, if he ends up still on his team, obviously signed a 4-year extension here. Could he end up being used as a trade chip? But if he does stay, I think his defensive abilities could make him a really fun watch.
I'm intrigued about his backup, Daron Sharp. I think he showed a lot of progress last year and think he's only going to get better. And even Zaire Williams, I think he's shown some flashes of being a really solid player at times, but it's been very inconsistent. I think in a more consistent role in Brooklyn, I think he could find himself and be a rotation player.
I'm going Noah Clowney. I thought his last 5 games of the season last year in the April runs, he was really, really solid. He hit the 3-ball at a high clip. Really good fit next to Nick Claxton. And if this works this coming season, where they're probably going to start together right away, it'll be a really fun watch. My other answer was probably Jalen Wilson. I was high on Wilson out of Kansas. I thought he was really solid when he did get some minutes last year, and he broke out in Summer League, and he's going to get genuine minutes this year under Coach Fernandez, and interested to see his growth as a player. As one of the older young guys in the league. Next, we'll talk about our 14. I've got the Wizards at 14.
I've also got the Wizards.
Yeah, the Wizards.
So once again, we're all even here. My thoughts on Washington is that they're going to this year focus their whole offense practically on developing these young guys, and as rightfully so.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the young core that Washington's built. Obviously, Alex Sarr, and then you got their new draftees, Bub Carrington, Keyshawn George. And it'll be interesting to see what they do with a guy like Jordan Poole, Kyle Kuzma. Do they keep them around, or do they trade them away at the deadline? And I think their roster is just slightly better than Brooklyn's, but they're still a tier below the rest of the East.
Yeah, I definitely do think Washington will be better than Brooklyn. I think Kyle Kuzma can get you some wins. Jordan Poole can get hot in some games as well, and even Valanciunas. So they have some guys that can, win some games. Obviously not a lot, but it's still going to be a pretty poor team, as evidenced by placing them 14th. And they should once again be one of the top candidates to get one of those high picks, which is what they need to do. And yeah, they have an interesting young core that's developing. It's still not quite at the top in terms of best young cores in the league, but it will get there once they continue to rebuild.
Same question I asked for the Nets guys. Who do you think would be the most exciting player to watch from your eyes?
I'm really excited to watch Bilal Coulibaly.
Yeah, that was my answer as well.
I would have said Bilal, but I'm going to say Corey Kispert. I really like Corey Kispert. I think his defense and his three-point shooting will be very impactful, not just for the Wizards this season, but if he gets traded elsewhere. I think he's a sneaky trade deadline candidate. A lot of contenders could utilize his services. Really solid cutter, good IQ basketball player, and hopefully he gets more on-ball touches this season. Now the 13th seed, I've got the Detroit Pistons.
I've gone with the Charlotte Hornets.
I'd go with the Pistons.
Interesting. So we've got a mismatch here. So Detroit, firstly, I really like their off-season. However, I still think their young guys, who are going to be the majority of the guys in the rotation, have got a long way to go, minus Kate Cunningham. Jaden Ivey, Osai Thompson, Ron Holland. 3 people. I'm probably missing a few young guys. Jalen Duran. They're still really raw players, and if they want to win some games, which they'll win more games this season, definitely, these guys will just have to keep on developing. We'll go to TK first, because we're still in Detroit here.
Yeah, so I think Cade will have a great season this year. I think that will definitely help them win more games. And Tobias Harris, I think, is a guy that can also win you games as well. And I think in a bigger role, he could average like close to 20 points a game. And I think Duran, could be better as well. But again, overall, I think the fit is still not great in terms of the roster construction, and they're still very, very bad defensively as well. So they won't win a whole lot still, but they'll be better than last year, which is fine, because they haven't really shown any progress the last few years in terms of getting better. But maybe if they can get better right now, maybe that's a step in the right direction.
I went with Charlotte just because I'm more impressed by Detroit's depth in their roster compared to Charlotte. I think Charlotte has the better top core guys, but I do think their lack of depth will end up hurting them, especially we've seen LaMelo's had a tendency to be injured, and I think that will end up hurting them if he does get injured again. They're still not that great of a team, and I think Detroit overall, top to bottom, is more complete.
Now for the 12th seed, I got the Chicago Bulls.
I've gone with the Detroit Pistons.
The Bulls here.
So the Bulls obviously got rid of DeMar DeRozan this past season, and this year their whole offense is going to be focusing on the development of Kobe White after his breakout year, and with the ball in Josh Giddey's hands. Josh Giddey's proven when he's with the ball, he's very impactful. We've seen this in small sample sizes with the Australian national team in the Olympics, or even when he was at the OKC. I'm interested to see Zach LaVine's season, because that will really be the X factor for this coming season. So the Bulls, I think they've got a very interesting range. I think they could be that last play-in spot, or they could be here. What do you guys think? What do you think, TK?
Yeah, I do see LaVine taking a step forward along with Kobe White, so I think that's why I think they'll be a little bit competitive. I think they might challenge for the play-in spot, but I think eventually they'll fall to 12th place, I think. So I think Giddey also will have a much better season. I like Ayo Dosunmu as well, and also drafting Matas Buzelis. I think he's got a very bright future, but I think he's still not quite ready to impact winning right away. So yeah, I see him as the 12th seed right now.
I went with Detroit here. The reason that I went with them above Charlotte, I mentioned it a bit earlier, but also getting rid of Monty Williams, bringing in JB Bickerstaff, who I do think is an upgrade over Monty. And I think if their young core can just be better than last year, and then they brought in all these veteran shooters, like guys like Tobias Harris, Tim Hardaway Jr., Malik Beasley, I think they're going to be very improved from last year, and I think it'll be enough to get them to 12.
Interesting. Same question I've asked before. So firstly for Chicago, for all three of us, who do you think will be the most exciting guy to watch and focus on for you guys?
I'm going to go with Ayo Dosunmu.
Yeah, maybe see Josh Giddey. I think for the first time he gets to kind of run the show, run the offense. So it'll be interesting to see how he looks like in this role.
I'm going Lonzo Ball. All reports are saying that he's going to be healthy this season and he's going to play. I hope that's the case. I'm interested to see how he is after the injury, and because I presume this will be his last year in Chicago before he, depending on how he plays, he could get a prove-it deal elsewhere next year, or it all really depends on his play. My other answer would probably be Julian Phillips. He showed a lot of flashes last year. Billy Donovan's gone against playing young guys normally, or rookies, and he played him last year when in some crucial games. Phillips stood up, so he's going to have an extended role this year, and I'm interested to see how he develops. Next, for the 11th seed, I've got the Toronto Raptors.
I've gone with the Chicago Bulls.
I went with Toronto as well.
I'm really fascinated about this, the financial, financial troubles potentially in the future for Toronto. They've got 4 starters on some big deals. The rest of their roster, minus Grady Dick, is quite bleak. But I'll let the talking go to TK, considering he's a Raptors fan. Your thoughts?
I just think the financials are okay. I think Emmanuel quickly. I think it's important to note that his contract's like a flat contract, which means that he's gonna get paid like less than 20% of the cap after like 2026. So I think it's fine right now. I think the first 2 years is really when he's overpaid a lot, and we're rebuilding, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah, in terms of overall the roster, it's just not. I don't think it's a great team right now. I think it still needs some growing to do around like Scotty Barnes, like some Steve RJ Barrett can prove to be that is along with quickly he needs to take a step forward. And overall, our depth is just not very good. But I think Scotty Barnes have a great season. I think he'll really help them challenge for a playing spot.
I went with Chicago here because I think that their roster is just slightly worse than Toronto's. I was in between those two. Chicago, I think with Levine is going to be the big X factor. And I think if they do end up moving him at the deadline, that will drop them lower. And it really just depends on how guys like Ayo Dosunmu, Josh Giddey play.
100%. Now, for my 10th seed in the East, I've got the Charlotte Hornets.
I went with the Hawks.
I went with the Raptors.
3 different here. Let's go. I went Charlotte because I'm really intrigued by their depth this season. I think they've done really well roster constructor wise. They've got good positional versatility at every single position, good depth at every position. They've got a lot of guys that fit the way Charles Lee wants to play. I'm buying a lot of stock into the Charlotte team. I think they're going to be fun to watch. I think they're going to play some decent basketball this year. And I hope LaMelo stays healthy, because that's what this is contingent on. But presuming he does, which is very, very rich to presume, I think this team's going to be very good. I love their starting core. I love their core in general. And with some development, internal development, I think this team could make the play-in.
Yeah, I went with Toronto. I think I'm really banking on a big Scotty development year. I think he'll have a really much improved year. And then other guys on the roster, I think IQ is still a very good point guard. I think they have guys like RJ Barrett, who I think is going to have a really good year. Their squad depth is a bit lacking compared to other teams like Chicago, but I do think that they're going to be better just because of their top pieces, if they can stay healthy.
Yeah, I think I went with the Hawks here at at 10 because I think Trae Young and Jalen Johnson, I think alone can get you that far. I think they really complement each other's game very well. I think Jalen Johnson's going to have another leap this year. But the rest of the roster is kind of a little bit, questionable. They don't have the greatest depth. But I think not having the Trae Young DeJounte duo, I think that just did not work out well. I think will kind of help them a little bit, but still not a great team. But I think they'll be a playing team once again.
Yeah, I completely agree there. I think I'll fast track here. My ninth seed in the East is the Atlanta Hawks. I think the Hawks, the less is more theory will really, really be impactful for them. But considering DeJounte and Trey, as TK said, just did not work at all, and having the ball in Trey's hands more, not having him to play off ball, if it works and Dyson Daniels continues developing that three ball, he seems like the prototypical on paper fit for a guard slash wing next to Trey Young. They've got a lot of size and really good defenders next to Trey this season, and that's something they really haven't had over the years. Good size at every position. I think the Hawks can stay competitive, and I'm really interested to see how they develop these young guys. Will Boston play? I'm pretty confident Daniels will play. For Sachet, I'm pretty confident he'll play also. Interested to see how these guys develop. Stuff like, will Okongwu start over Capella? It will be a really good discussion to have come opening night, and when we talk about our award predictions. They've got a few guys who could be sneaky award guys.
For my 9th seed, I went with the Atlanta Hawks.
I went with the Miami Heat at 9.
We're going to talk about it, guys, or I go straight to my 8th seed?
Yeah, I went with Atlanta for a lot of the same reasons that you mentioned. I really think their young core will develop well. Obviously, I think Trey Young is enough without the wonky fit with DeJounte Murray to really help them out. And I do think their roster still with guys like Onyeka Okongwu and then the young guys like Zachary Risache, Kobe Buffkin, I think it will be enough to get them into the play-in and potentially maybe sneak into the playoffs.
I'm honestly very low on the Miami Heat this year. I think Jimmy Butler's, I think he's been getting worse. He got noticeably worse last year, both defensively and offensively, and I see that kind of continuing because he's a guy that kind of relies on quickness, athleticism. So I think it's going to affect his game a little bit. And then the rest of the roster, I think, pretty not great. I think it's just not a great team overall.
With that being said, I completely realized I switched up my Heat and Atlanta pick. So my 9th seed is actually the Miami Heat and my 8th seed is actually the Atlanta Hawks. But I'll speak about the Heat here. I completely agree with what TK said there. The Heat, really poor roster construction, relying on Jimmy Butler to actually try in the regular season is not the best idealism to focus on. However, if he wants to get paid this coming off season, he'll have to actually lock in, play games, and play like Jimmy Butler plays. But other than Jimmy, the reliance on Bam Adebayo is going to be at the all-time high once again. Khalil Ware's probably going to get minutes straight away, which I'm okay with. But just in general, like, their guard stocks is really poor minus Tyler Hero and Terry Rozier. Off the bench, they've got Josh Richardson and Alec Burks. Burks is a good shooter, good bucket getter, spark plug. But they've got redundancies at a lot of positions here. They're still undersized. And the Heat, just in general, they're getting older. They really need one of the Jovic or Harkes to make a big breakout to even stay in the play-in top side of the play-in hunt. My 8th seed is the Atlanta Hawks, who I've talked about. So I'll go. Have we talked about the 8th seed, guys?
My 8th seed is the Miami Heat.
For 8th, I have, maybe it's a hot take, but I got the Charlotte Hornets at 8.
I think these two teams are going to have a very interesting range you guys mentioned. My 7th seed is the Milwaukee Bucks.
My 7th seed is the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Got the Orlando Magic at 7.
So the Bucks take, I was thinking about this for a long time. I think the Bucks had a really good offseason. However, I'm just really worried about this team's ability to stay afloat, considering the age of this team is getting older and older. I still think they're going to be quite good, and I would not be surprised if they finish in the top 3, top 4 seeds. To be honest, I'm just projecting their health. I think over the years, Middleton's hardly stayed healthy in the regular season. Lillard's had some injury problems, Giannis even. And I really like what they did this off-season. But I'm just quite worried about this injury health and their age, because this team really needs to get younger, in my opinion. I wanted them to get younger this off-season. They didn't really do that. I'm just interested. What do you guys think about your picks?
Yeah, I'm with Cleveland here. I think it's not that they're necessarily got worse. They lost to Coro, but he still hasn't signed anywhere. We'll see what happens with him. But I think it's more that the rest of the East just got better. And the reason I went with them here is obviously there's the injury concerns with a lot of their core guys missing 20 games last year. And then it's just their team is very top heavy with guys like Mobley, Garland, Mitchell, Allen. And the question is, like, can this big four work? And I don't really think it can, to be honest.
Yeah, Orlando's an interesting team. I just think the other team is just better, but nothing bad about Orlando. I don't think I think their offense is still going to be a bit of a concern still. They're still kind of relying on Point, Paolo, and running Jalen Suggs, I guess, the list at point guard. I still don't love, and I think a lot went right for them in terms of, like, they were really good defensively. Can they continue to play at that level defensively? They could, but I'm not sure if they can. It'll be like a top 2 defense again, and which might be why they kind of drop off a little bit.
At 6, I've got the Cleveland Cavaliers.
At 6, I've gone with the Milwaukee Bucks.
I went with the Pacers at 6.
So Cleveland, just to piggyback of what Mohit said, I'm worried about their injuries also. But last season they won about 50 games without 3 of their 4 best players being healthy for most of that. They all missed 50 plus games. That's a very good thing to have. However, this Eastern Conference, the top side of the Eastern Conference is so loaded to the point where one of the few teams we've all mentioned in this spot, I wouldn't be surprised if they miss the top 6. So it's all nitpicking in this 5 to 8 range, I would say. What do you guys have to say about your picks?
Yeah, I went with the Bucks. I do think just they're due for some natural regression with, I think Middleton will regress. I think Brook Lopez will regress. I do think Dame will be better than where he was at last year, and a full year under Doc Rivers, if they don't end up switching coaches mid-season again, will benefit them. And their team got better, but the top 5 teams in the East, I do think just made significant moves and are going to significantly improve, where I just don't think the Bucks improved enough, and with their aging core, they're going to end up dropping in the standings.
So you got the Pacers 6 at the same spot they were last year. Yeah, I think with a full season of a healthier Halliburton and a full season of Siakam is going to be helpful, and we'll have another pretty successful season. But I think the defensive issues are still very much there. Like, they're still not a good defensive team. And I don't know if they'll continue to be the number 1, number 2 ranked offense in the entire NBA after some of the other teams improved. So which is why I kind of have them 6. They should be like they'll probably likely be a challenging first round team, maybe a second round, but I think they're gonna be 6.
At 5, I've got the Orlando Magic.
At 5, I went with the Indiana Pacers.
You got the Cavs at 5.
I think the Magic are going to have a really, really solid year. As TK said, I'm worried about their point Paolo / point Suggs strategy. It's not much of a strategy for Suggs because he has to start. He's earned that right. But I'm still worried about their offense. It got really stagnant at stages last year. They brought in KCP, who will help minimize that. Good shooter, good defender. It's what they need. But again, I'm still worried about where the offense will come from when it gets dry. Grimes, not a good 3-point shooter. Paolo, not the best 3-point shooter. Just, they need someone to make a breakout this year as a playmaker. If that comes from Paolo again, great. If it doesn't, great.
Yeah, I went with the Pacers here. I'm pretty high on them. I think just where they were last year, where they were able to make it to all the way to the conference finals, and then full year Pascal Siakam. I think a guy like Nemhard could be a most improved player candidate. I'm really high on him. I think he's going to take a big leap this year. And then you got obviously Tyrese Halliburton. If he can be more consistent throughout the year, I think they have a very good, strong core that can cement them in this top 6. And I have them at 5.
Yeah, I still think the Cavs are a pretty good team. I had 5. I think Darius Garland and Evan Mobley won't miss as much time as they did last year. But yeah, it still might result in them, staying in the same spot because I think a lot of other teams once again got better. But yeah, I think Garland's gonna have a better season. Donovan Mitchell's gonna do Donovan Mitchell things, and Mobley and Allen is still an elite defensive front court. But obviously they still don't quite fit perfectly together. Just like Garland and Mitchell don't fit perfectly together either, which is why I don't think they'll be like a top 4 seed or anything. So yeah, I think they'll be another team that's gonna be a scrappy first round team.
At 4, I've got the Philadelphia 76ers. I think the Sixers are going to be extremely elite, and I'm really happy for Sixers fans. They've got some annoying ones in their fan base. However, I think this is the year where they've been asking for multiple years. They're going to be a championship contender, and I really hope their coaches, or more their medical staff, have the obligation and the right to rest guys during the regular season more, because I don't want to worn down Joel Embiid / Paul George going to the playoffs. They've got a good backup for Embiid now to the point where they can live with giving him a few games off. Paul George, they've got depth at the wing, every position. So that's the only reason why I've got them 4. I've got them as my 3rd best team in the East. However, I think they're going to be smarter with their game management this year, and I think they're going to be a very, very good team.
At 4, I went with the Orlando Magic.
I went with Philly as well. Like you mentioned, I think the Embiid and Paul George will be monitored a bit more due to their injury history, and they'll look to kind of keep them as fresh as possible come playoff time.
Yeah, I went with the Magic here. I think that the offense will be much improved from last year with the signing of KCP. I think he's exactly what they needed at that 2-guard position. The main question I have now is obviously who's going to be that lead playmaker. I think if Anthony Black can take a big step up, he can fill in that role as a backup point guard who can be the lead playmaker at times depending on how they stagger the rotation. And I think Franz will take a big step up. His shooting can be more consistent like it was in year 2 compared to where it was last year. I think he can be a much better player, and he can be potentially a borderline all-star. So I have them at 4.
At 3, I've got the Indiana Pacers.
I've got the Milwaukee Bucks at 3.
And I've gone with Philly at 3.
So I've gone the Pacers because I think they're going to be very, very good in the regular season. They're a team which is pretty built for the regular season. They've got depth at every position. Some guys who I think should be in the rotation elsewhere in the league are going to be out of it. People like Jarace Walker, Ben Shepherd might be out of it. They've got a really, really deep roster. Natural development from Tyrese Halliburton, Isaiah Jackson, Benedict Mathurin, Neesmith, Nemhard. The list goes on. They proved what they could do last year in the regular season, plus in the playoffs. And I think this year they're going to be very, very good, and they're going to have very, very, very good offense.
I went with Philly here. I think they did a really good job filling out their depth with obviously they went and maxed Paul George, so that really restricted them financially, but they were still able to do a great job filling out their roster with guys like Caleb Martin, Andre Drummond, and Kyle Lowry, Eric Gordon. I think they had a very solid offseason in that way, and obviously I think Paul George is going to be one of the best co-stars, and he'll be great next to Embiid. So I think they will end up as that third seed. Their only real question is injury.
I feel like the Bucks are very underrated this year. I think Damian Lillard's gonna have a bounce back season this year, and really make that Dame Giannis pairing work a lot better than it did last year with the new coach for a full season. And Doc Rivers, a more experienced coach, who's a great regular season coach. And I think Chris Middleton's has shown he didn't really lose a whole lot offensively last year. I think he's gonna continue that into next year. Yeah, with all that went wrong last year, they still finished with the top 3 seeds. So I expect a lot of some of their issues that they had last year to be fixed. And also bringing in Gary Trent Jr. I think is going to be great for them. Provides another secondary creator scorer. Prince is another much needed, backup wing who can guard and play and shoot some threes. So I think overall, they have a very, very good team, and they should be a title contender this year.
At 2, I've got the New York Knicks.
I've also got the Knicks at 2.
I have the Knicks as well.
I think the Knicks are going to be very, very good for the regular season. I worried about putting them this high, considering we know OG Anunoby's injury history, we know Mitchell Robinson's injury history, and their season, and I hope this is not an exaggeration, but I genuinely think their season relies on Mitchell Robinson's health. Their backup is 6'8" Precious Achiuwa, who was really good for the Knicks last year. But behind Precious, you got Jericho Sims, Ariel Hukporti. One of those two guys, the latter guys I mentioned, they're going to have to be solid third-string centers this year. So there's going to be some games where they get a lot of burn. But other than that, the Knicks, depth at every position. They've got 2 to 3 guys who are starters in this league, really elite off the bench guys like DiVincenzo and Josh Hart. They're going to be very, very fun to watch this year.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of their offseason as well. Obviously, the Mikal Bridges trade. And then they brought back most of their core. They obviously lost Isaiah Hartenstein, which I think is really going to hurt their big man depth. They are, like you mentioned, heavily reliant on Mitchell Robinson staying healthy and then potentially taking a step up. But I really like the top of the core that they have with guys like, obviously, Brunson, Julius Randle, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Josh Hart, Dante DiVincenzo. They have a very, very strong core.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of this team. This is how they're built. It's like a perfectly built team. You got a star point guard in Julius Randle, then you have a power forward, and Jalen Brunson, and Julius Randle, star power forward Julius Randle, who fits perfectly next to Jalen Brunson. And you have like 2 elite 3-and-D wings in Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby. And you have a really rock solid starting center in Mitchell Robinson. And you have like 3 very productive bench guys, above average bench players in Dante, Hart, and McBride. I think Precious Achiuwa is a really good backup as well. So like there's overall, you got the depth. They're really good defensively and offensively. They have guys, a lot of guys can shoot the ball, put the ball on the floor and pass and do everything else. Like they're really good.
Yeah, the Knicks are going to be really solid this year. They've got. I hope Mikal Bridges returns to that Phoenix Suns style defense, because if he does, him and Anunoby on the wings are going to be hounding offenses. And Jalen Brunson's going to take another very good year. I think Julius Randle, he's got underrated in just general conversations. He was very good last year, as he always is as a Knick in the regular season. And this year, he's finally going to get the chance to have a playoff run where he's not the number one option and he's got offensive threats next to him. So I'm excited for Julius Randle to prove the doubters wrong. And for the 1 seed, we've all got the Boston Celtics.
Yeah, I think Boston is still very clearly the team to beat in the East. They've kept their entire rotation, and that's exactly what they had to do. Obviously, financially, they're very restricted. So they did what they needed to. They got their top players on long-term extensions. And I think they're going to be easily the best team in the East. I think their biggest threat is the Knicks. So we'll see who ends up coming out of the East in the playoffs.
Yeah, the Celtics, I think, are for sure the best team in the Eastern Conference this year once again, the defending champions. I don't anticipate anyone really taking a step back or anything. It's just everyone's kind of... I guess Drew Holiday's 34, but I still think he'll be just fine. And everyone else is going to continue to do what they do. Derek White, Jason Tatum, Jalen Brown, and Porzingis. In depth, they got a decent bench. Like they're overall just they ran back the same team, and they're going to once again be a dominant team once again.
100%. The Celtics brought back every single guy who won a championship with them last year. It's always a good method. Plus, they added in Baylor Scheinman, who I thought could be a really sneaky all-rookie team guy before he got drafted to the Celtics because he won't get any minutes. We're going to see just the chemistry's just going to grow and grow. Sam Hauser, Hayden Pritchard, they're going to get a lot of minutes off that bench again. The Celtics are going to be very, very scary in this regular season and in the playoffs, and they're going to be a threat to be reckoned with. So that wraps up our standings predictions. We're going to go to the questions. So we've got a few questions catered to just the Eastern Conference here. The first one is, what team do you think will just improve?
I think the Pacers will.
The Hornets are going to take a big step forward this year.
My answer is the Hornets also. What team will drastically fall?
I don't think there's going to be anyone that will drastically fall, but I think the Miami Heat are kind of the team that I think they'll take a step back.
I've got the Nets. I think they're going to go from that 12th seed, 11th seed to the 15th seed, and it's going to be pretty bleak watching, but it'll be good for them. I like this next question. What team is better suited for regular season ball compared to what team is better suited for the playoffs?
I think the Magic are better suited for the regular season, and for the playoffs, I would say it's the Knicks.
I think the Sixers are better suited for the playoffs. I think having the star power they have and multiple guys can create their own shot, I think that's going to be more valuable in a playoff setting versus the depth in the regular season. And in terms of better in the regular season, I think that would be I'd say the Cleveland Cavaliers.
I've gone for the regular season, the Indiana Pacers. And for the playoff setting, I've got the New York Knicks. And the next question is, can a team like the Hornets, Raptors, or Pistons potentially get into the play-in as the 10th seed? But we've seen for TK and I that we do think so.
I do think there's a world where they do sneak in, but I currently think that they're still a step away.
Next one is players or player you're excited for just to watch this season.
Josh Giddey in Chicago.
I'm interested to see Emmanuel Quickly's progression this year.
Mine's Dyson Daniels for Atlanta. I liked what I saw out of him in the Australian national team. I hope he'll get some minutes this year and be able to prove himself as an NBA player. I'm also excited to watch Tyler Kolek for the Knicks. I doubt he'll play. So, I'll watch him for Westchester because I think in the next 1 or 2 years, he's going to be a really solid backup point guard in this NBA. Players you think will disappoint?
I think Julius Randle will disappoint.
I'd say I think probably Jimmy Butler this year. He'll take a step back.
My exact answer is Jimmy Butler. Mohit, I'm interested in what you mean. Could you expand on Julius Randle as your choice?
I'm just not really sure what his role will be on this Knicks team, and I think it's going to be really interesting. Obviously, he's been a guy that's dealt with injuries all of last year. He's had a lot of injury concerns. He ended up missing the entirety of the playoffs, and I'm just not really sure if he stays healthy, what his role is on this team next to guys like OG Anunoby, Dante DiVincenzo, and Mikal Bridges, where they have a lot of guys who can really take over a game, whereas I'm not sure if he quite can do.
Really? I think that's some pretty, reactionary takes there. I think Julius Randle has proven on the Knicks. even last year in that 20-game sample size with OG Anunoby and him, that he's a good fit with these guys. The pick and roll with Randall and Brunson and Randall worked quite effectively with OG on the wings and Dante DiVincenzo on the wings. Randall still got his. He was an improved playmaker. I think he's going to be one pick. If there was a question like which player you think will impress you the most, I would have chosen Randall. I genuinely think this is his year. He's been really solid for the Knicks. He fits this roster really well. And you mentioned his injury histories over the year. He's been played like 90% of his career as a Knick. He's been healthy for most of it, so that's not much of a concern. Just in general, I'm not gonna lie, I strongly disagree with this take, but I like it. What do you think of Jimmy Butler for TK and I?
Yeah, I think that's another guy that it could be a guy who's going to disappoint. Obviously, we know what he is capable of, but he failed to prove that he can actually consistently do this, especially in the regular season. And he's always been a guy who's been thought of as like, okay, a playoff improver. But like at this point, the Heat don't need him to only be a playoff improver. They need him to perform in the regular season because the rest of their roster is simply not good enough for them to get a top 6 seed.
Yeah, 100%. And the playoff riser talk, like, that's what they hang their hat on, and they need to make the playoffs for that to actually be a real label on Jimmy Butler. And I've got serious concerns that will eventuate. Thank you guys for listening to episode 8 of the Fanspo Hoops podcast. Thank you, Mohid. Thank you, TK. We out.